This is Module 3, an overview of health hazard awareness for the entertainment industry. This material was produced under grant number SH05146SH9 from the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, U.S. Department of Labor. It does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of the U.S. Department of Labor, nor does the mention of trade names, commercial products, or organizations imply endorsement by the U.S. government. The perfect shot, the perfect lighting, the perfect camera angle. Is there a hazard here? Of course. Is it easy to spot? Of course. However, there are some hazards that could be present during a film shoot that are harder to assess, but they can still cause significant illness or injury. We will spend this module discussing common health hazards found in the entertainment industry and how to reduce exposures for all affected crew members. When beginning the search for a location, the responsibility for who will be part of the hazard identification process should be determined and communicated. The perfect location has been identified. It has the right feel or lighting, and the cost is right. There is space to set up and film. But are there hidden hazards lurking in this perfect location? How do you know? Has it been used recently, and for what? If possible, we want to start with a visual inspection of the space or building and determining if modifications to the structure will be required before or during filming. Experienced location scouting firms should be familiar with some common environmental or health hazards that may be present based on the condition of the building or space. If the location has been vacant for some time, there may be health hazards that have developed due to water leaks, vandalism, vagrancy, or the lack of temperature and humidity controls. Consider sources of information about the potential hazards. Do we know the building owner? Can we find out what the building was used for before? You should ask the leasing agent or building owner if they have asbestos-containing materials, lead-based paint, mold, or have ever tested for these items. What you need to look for will depend on how the space will be used and if any structural or aesthetic modification is required. Completing a health hazard risk assessment is very important before bringing people into a space to begin work. A risk assessment takes into account what the potential hazard is, who is at risk for exposure to that hazard, what kind of hazard controls or strategies should be used to keep people safe, and any additional measures that might need to be taken. Take a moment to review these example health hazards and consider whether you have any other suggestions for controls. For example, in the first row, bird or rodent waste might be present in filming locations that have been unoccupied for a period of time. These animal droppings can contain viral or bacterial pathogens that could make crew members ill if they breathe in the dusts as the space is prepared for filming. A control strategy would include appropriately cleaning the area before the space is to be occupied, and preferably in a way that prevents the waste material from becoming airborne. Additional protective gear might be worn during cleanup. When scouting for an interior location and completing a pre-assessment, someone must determine if there are potential hazards with the building materials. In addition to ensuring that the building is structurally sound, including checking to see if it is condemned, certified for occupancy, or if there are fire safety measures present, there are also possible environmental health hazards that can be hidden within the structure. If the building has sustained fire damage, there are chemical residues that may remain on surfaces. If the building has sustained water damage, there is a potential for mold growth, which can cause allergic reactions and breathing issues for susceptible individuals. If the building is an older structure, it may have asbestos-containing materials, such as flooring, flooring adhesive, insulation, or in roofing materials. It is always safer to err on the side of caution and request from the building owner a copy of an asbestos inspection. This is especially important if the building looks like the building in the photos shown, or if the production includes any disturbance of interior walls, ceilings, windows, pipes, ducts, or floors or exterior surfaces, including siding, walls, and roofing. Lead paint is also a hidden danger in interior and exterior paint on older buildings, such as those built before 1950, but also up to as late as 1978. If paint is chipping or will be disturbed during prep or filming activities, such as pictured here, professional remediation may be necessary. If the paint chips fall on the floor and could be crushed to dust during foot traffic through the building, the dust could become airborne and cause an inhalational hazard. The dust may also contaminate clothing of the crew and actors and could be tracked into trailers, personal vehicles, or homes. This increases the risk of lead exposure to the families of all members of the production crew. If you have selected an outdoor location for filming, there are a few things to consider ahead of time. First, the weather. It can either cooperate and result in a picture-perfect ending like a rom-com, or become worse than a horror flick. If there is potential for severe weather, including wind, tornadoes, hail, rain, flash flooding, or electrical or thunderstorms, there must be a plan in place ahead of time that has been communicated to the crew. This plan should cover where and when to take shelter, how weather will be tracked while on location or set, and who is responsible for communicating to those at the scene. If pre-production or production will take place during warmer months or in certain locations, special attention needs to be given to the potential for heat-related illness. Sets should have access to shade, cooling stations, and water, such as pictured here, and everyone on location should be knowledgeable on the use of these resources and under what conditions they should be used and how often. Preparing for and responding to a heat illness requires additional attention, as someone experiencing a heat stroke is undergoing a medical emergency, and action to reduce the victim's body temperature must be taken immediately. If filming is taking place in a more remote or isolated location, and emergency services may have an extended response time, ensure that a plan is in place for communication and on-site actions to be taken while waiting for emergency services. If filming outside, it is important to know how to recognize certain plants, such as poison ivy, poison sumac, or nettles, so they can be avoided. Stings from bees, wasps, or ants can cause a life-threatening allergic reaction for some individuals, so pre-planning is important here. In some geographical locations, certain insects, such as ticks or mosquitoes, may harbor and transmit disease with their bites, such as Lyme disease or Zika, so again, proper planning and precautions should be taken. These include things such as knowing what plants and animals are native to the area, wearing long sleeves or pants, using insect repellent, paying attention to standing water sources, and keeping basic first aid kits on site. If cast or crew members have a known allergy to stinging insects, this should be communicated and a plan in place for obtaining immediate medical attention if needed. This is important, especially if you are filming in a more remote location with limited access to emergency services. For additional precautions or questions, contact the local health department, local experts in the area you will be working in, or if your production has a set medic or safety representative, that they should also be able to help answer questions. If filming will require crew or talent entering bodies of water, such as a pond or lake, be aware that in certain locations or during certain times of year, the water could contain runoff contaminated with bacteria that could cause illness or infections. The water may need to be tested, and local public health experts in the area may be able to assist. Finally, the spread of communicable disease, such as the common cold or flu, or as in 2020, COVID-19 coronavirus, is an additional environmental hazard to consider. Adhering to proper public health guidance regarding cleaning and disinfection of commonly shared surfaces, tools, and equipment, hand washing, covering coughs and sneezes, and managing occupancy in areas with poor ventilation should be part of the health and safety plan for the production set. Many workplaces require handling chemicals, whether as part of the job task or to clean up after a spill or just as part of general housekeeping. Some chemicals could be the same products used at home, others could be very different. We will discuss some of the more common chemical hazards associated with film production in the next few slides, and then talk about ways to keep yourself safe during the use of these materials. There are numerous chemical products that are used to create and also repair the backdrops and props used in film production. Paints, dyes, or inks are often used to create visual backdrops, and depending on how these materials are applied to a backdrop, curtain, or prop, such as through a roller, brush, dip, or spray, the amount of chemical material that could be inhaled is variable. Some paints or inks need a period of time to cure or dry, during which they will off-gas and create odors. The odors could be bothersome or cause health effects such as headaches, dizziness, or nausea for some people. Additionally, some solvents or cleaners, as well as spray glues or adhesives, can contain chemical ingredients that are not only obnoxious or irritating to smell, but that are also more toxic to inhale or get on the skin. These might be used during set construction, effects, repair to set backgrounds, or props. As we will discuss shortly, it is very important to read the labels of the chemical products and know how to find information about the hazardous ingredients. Set and prop construction may use a material foam to create lightweight shapes for backdrops and props, such as fake rocks or columns. These foamed plastics are commonly made from sprayable polyurethane foam or two-part rigid foam, such as when you combine an A part and a B part together, either from combining liquid in a container or through a spray hose. In addition to potentially being very flammable, when these chemicals, known as isocyanates, combine to generate the expanding foam, the vapor that is also released can be inhaled or settle on the skin, and this airborne chemical can cause significant health effects. Some chemicals found at a film production set might be present as things that are physically purchased or brought on site, such as fuel for a generator. However, it is important to note that some chemical materials are converted from one form to another when we use them, and this could change the exposure hazard for the people around them. For example, fuel is typically a liquid, but once it is emptied into a generator, the incomplete combustion of the fuel results in exhaust. Carbon monoxide, or CO, is a colorless, odorless gas that is present in exhaust, so generators must be placed where there is abundant fresh outdoor air, and not placed inside where dangerous levels of CO can build up. Welding fume is another example of a potential airborne chemical hazard that results when one material is transformed into another during its use. If set construction requires welding or soldering metal materials together, the smoke seen being released from the weld is called welding fume, and the vaporized metals contained within that cloudy-looking smoke can be harmful if they are inhaled. Finally, another common chemical substance used to create a certain atmospheric effect during filming is theatrical or atmospheric fog, smoke, or haze. Theatrical fogs and haze are generally water-based and non-irritating. However, sometimes a glycol product is added, and for some people with asthma, hypersensitivity, or with long-term exposure, this can be problematic. Additionally, certain states have regulations regarding exposure of children or minors to fog and haze effects, so check in pre-production for any limitations or requirements on use. This may include using a real-time monitoring device that measures the amount of aerosol particles in the air to ensure the concentration doesn't exceed an allowable limit. So, how can we find out information about these chemicals and how to protect ourselves when working with them on set? There is more to chemical safety than just putting it into an internet search and seeing what pops up. Employers are required to provide information about the types of chemicals you might work with during production, how to handle them safely, and what to do if there is a chemical spill or emergency. Chemical containers should be properly labeled, and chemicals have an informational document called a Safety Data Sheet, or SDS, that should be stored in an accessible location at your place of work. Safety data sheets are provided by the manufacturer and are used to understand the properties and hazards of chemicals used in the workplace. When we understand the hazards of the chemicals we are using for our job, it allows us to better protect ourselves while we complete our tasks. SDSs are useful tools in the workplace and should be reviewed prior to starting any job that requires the use of a chemical. It's best to learn how to respond if you have any accidental exposure or spill before it happens, so you can react quickly. SDSs can sometimes be tricky to read or understand because they may use terms you haven't heard before. If you have questions, it is important to ask your supervisor. Safety data sheets give information about the name of the chemical, the routes that the chemical can enter into the body, the signs and symptoms of exposure, how employees can protect themselves if they are exposed, and explains what to do in emergencies. The information on an SDS follows a standardized order so that no matter what chemical is being used, the user could always look at the same section on each SDS to find the same type of information. This approach is used by companies worldwide to keep consistency for everyone, and this is called a Globally Harmonized System, or GHS. Let's look at an example together. Now let's look at this example SDS together. First, we might want to know why we are using a certain chemical, and then we might want to know how it could potentially hurt us while we are using it. The first page of an SDS should answer those two questions for us. Here, we have an SDS for sodium hypochlorite, or bleach. Section 1, Identification, tells us the product identity and any alternate names. Chemical exposures can cause many different health effects or symptoms. Exposure to some chemicals may cause dizziness or breathing problems right away. Other chemicals, if they get on your skin, can immediately cause a severe burn or destroy your skin tissue. These are immediate effects. Section 2 of an SDS will always address the hazards of the chemical. On this SDS for sodium hypochlorite, we can see from the hazard statement, danger, located under the red diamond, which is called a pictogram, that it can cause severe skin burns and eye damage. When chemicals are present in the workplace, information about them must be easily available to anyone who will be required to work with them or could have exposure. And remember, sometimes it is a chemical you create by conducting a task or using a piece of equipment, such as welding, sawing on wood to construct a set, or operating a generator or gas-powered tool. It is important that you know who to talk to on set if you experience an adverse health effect. As a reminder, it is always best to control hazards from the top down, meaning finding a way to eliminate a hazard before anyone is even exposed and has a chance to be injured. Do pay attention to ventilation for certain activities and don't assume that just working outside is sufficient. Open transport containers that might contain painted backdrops in areas where there is good additional ventilation, such as outdoors or with fans, to help dissipate accumulated vapors from off-gassing materials. Likewise, keep individual containers of solvents, paints, inks, or cleaning agents used in set construction tightly closed when not in use. Although theatrical fogs and haze are generally water-based and non-irritating, it is still important to consider appropriate controls. Place the fogging equipment where it doesn't blow directly onto crew members, for example, or consider post-production visual effect work rather than during active filming. Be mindful of cleanup. Don't use compressed air to clean surfaces where things may have settled. Choose vacuuming, wiping, or wet methods depending on the waste material. If necessary, personal protective equipment, or PPE, may be needed. Remember, removing the hazard prevents all the responsibility for choosing the correct safety and health measures from falling on individual crew members. However, if it's not possible to remove the hazard completely, establishing and then adhering to workplace policies and procedures can help to reduce exposure to hazards, and the use of personal protective equipment, PPE, although the least effective way to control hazards, is often a necessary component to employee protection. Personal protective equipment, or PPE, is gear that is worn by an individual to provide protection during a hazardous activity. This can include hazards to the head, including our eyes, such as flying particles or splashing chemicals, the nose and lungs during inhalation of airborne contaminants, and ears during loud film sequences or set construction activities. It can also include hazards to the hands and fingers, such as cut or abrasion hazards from moving or manipulating materials, handling vibrating equipment, and handling chemicals such as paint, solvents, or glues. PPE is also used to protect the body. This can include fall arrest systems, but also when filming in low light conditions and needing high visibility vests. It may include hazards to the skin, such as when painting a large set and needing a full body covering. And finally, it might include hazards to the feet, from objects dropping onto the toes, stepping on something sharp like a nail, or walking through outdoor locations where there is a possibility of venomous snakes. We might need PPE if the other controls put in place to eliminate or reduce the hazard are not fully effective or reliable. Although an employer has a duty to explore and implement controls at the top of this pyramid first, improving policies and providing training is also necessary. Personal protective equipment is considered supplemental to these other control strategies. Can you think of situations or workplaces you've encountered where a multi-control approach was used? There are over 20,000 workplace eye injuries per year, and over 90% of them could have been prevented with appropriate protective eyewear. If a crew member is exposed to flying particles, such as during spray painting, sanding, or cutting materials that produce dust particles, eye protection meeting the government standard must be worn. An example of this would be eye protection that meets the ANSI Z87.1 specification, and it will be marked as such. Please note that standard prescription lenses and frames do not meet these requirements, and either safety glasses must be fitted over top prescription glasses or specific safety prescription glasses obtained. Hand injuries result in over 1 million visits to the ER each year. Of these, 70% of those injured were found to not be wearing gloves at the time of the injury. Selecting the right pair of gloves for the job depends on the task being completed. Are the gloves just for thermal protection, or are harmful chemical substances being handled? Or are rough materials being moved around, such as wood or metal, during set construction? It is important to determine what level of grip or finger dexterity is needed, and to also select the right size glove for your hand. If you are assigned PPE, you must wear it. There is a reason you have been given it, and it is your responsibility to wear it correctly and consistently in order to achieve the protection you expected. PPE must fit correctly for it to work correctly, and that responsibility falls on you, the wearer. Incorrectly fitting eye protection or hand protection can create an additional hazard, so if it doesn't fit correctly, notify a supervisor or AD so that the appropriate PPE can be provided. Before you put on your PPE, inspect it for damage. Keep it clean and maintained, and determine when to replace it, how to obtain new PPE from your supervisor or AD. Although chemical hazards that might be in the air should be eliminated through other controls, if this is not possible, a respirator may be the only means of adequate protection. This determination should come with the help of a safety and health professional, and there are certain legal obligations that must be met by the employer to ensure adequate protection. There may be instances, however, where nuisance or non-hazardous exposures might exist, and dust masks or filtering facepiece respirators may be available for comfort. There are still obligations regarding the use of this particular type of PPE, however, so be sure to check with your management or supervisors first. We are now at our summary and review for this module, Health Hazard Awareness for the Entertainment Industry. Although the urge to move quickly, to capture the perfect lighting or stay on budget is strong, it is imperative that everyone on the set or involved in a production take responsibility for ensuring the health and safety of themselves and others around them. This means always checking with supervisors regarding specific requirements or obligations on completing the work safely. This responsibility may change over time, so know where and who to access this information from. The following 3 slides will allow you to review your knowledge for this section. Review question 1. During set construction, chemical products might be used to make a backdrop, such as foamed plastic or paint. Information about these chemicals might be found in a safety data sheet, or SDS. Is this true or false? That's right. The answer is true. Review question 2. A saw is used to cut wood pieces during set construction. Is eye protection needed? Is the answer A, no? Or is it B, goggles like what might be used for skiing would work? Or is it C, safety glasses that meet a specific standard? Did you choose C? That's correct. Remember, appropriate eye protection will have an ANSI Z87 rating imprinted on it. Review question 3. During location scouting, an old building previously used as a textile mill is identified as a potential option for filming. Are there any potential health hazards? Is it A, nope, as long as it's structurally sound, roll tape? Or B, yes, toxic building materials such as lead paint or asbestos, animal droppings, or mold might be present. This needs additional assessment. Based on what you see in this photo, and knowing the building was used for another purpose at another point in time, it's definitely important to do some additional research before determining if this space is safe to occupy. The following are some additional informational resources on the topics we have covered in this module. As always, reach out to your on-site coordinator, assistant director, or safety representative for more information.